Welcome everybody to this Systems for Breakfast seminar. One of starts to get many that we have actually had so far. These Systems for Breakfast serve a purpose for us at Förnyelselabbet to reflect on our practices and also share our practice with all of you. And we're very happy to have so many with us today. My name is Pia Mäkelinen. I'm manager of public sector innovation and collaboration at SVID, the Swedish Industrial Design Foundation, a foundation that has a mission to work with sustainable transformation through design and does that in many different projects. One of the projects that we've had is Förnyelselabbet. A lab that has tried to being started as a policy lab in 2016 and soon discovering that in order for us to work with really complex challenges, we really need to be very highly contextual, highly situational, and also collectively learning. One of these things have also transferred into a deeper feeling that we also need to be collectively learning in our team and along with our peers. So therefore we have these Systems for Breakfast, and we are delighted to have so many of you here today. I'm soon going to present, I'm here today with Sofia Bäckman, who's a communicator at SVID, Netta Koronen and Elin Engström from SVID and Motiva in Helsinki, and Josina Wink from Oslo. So we have sort of a Nordic vibe here today, and we're very interested to hear where you are all listening into this morning. So you can write in the chat where you are this morning geographically, but also what you are curious to find out. Why are you interested in this topic? So please use the chat for that so that we can have a few insights into our reflection and discussion of this. And I'll see if I can. Not only Nordic, we have people from Singapore. Very well.
I can just break in and say that we're also recording this seminar. So if you want to, you can take your video off if you don't want to be seen. But so this will also be available afterwards to watch. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sofia. And it's lovely. It's everything from walking around a lake here in Stockholm to people coming in from other people coming in from Norway, Mauritius. Lovely. You're all very welcome. I'll share a few slides on very general overview of what we do at Förnyelselabbet, and you will be find out much more from the deep practice when Elin and Netta talk in a few hours or in a few minutes. We'll see here. So the Systems for Breakfast that we have invited you to has, the topic is everyday embodied systemic design. And when we talk about design, we use the service design where we think that's a super practice for finding out needs and also trying things out to meet those needs. But we've also added a dimension of systemic design because we believe that it's incredibly important in complex challenges where many different stakeholders and inhabitants need to sort of be engaged, learn together, and actually find space to act. And in systemic design, the way we see it, we focus on the relationships and the dynamics of the systems that we go into. And in order for us to go into systems, we need to sort of find out what is the challenge, who are the people involved, what are the stakeholders involved in this. And you can see the picture to the left there also dealing a little bit with what are the mental models, what are the policy frames for this, what are the resources involved, and what is the practical work. And also in our work, we have always sort of formed and shaped a lab group, and that has, I think, two parts to it. We want to have a group that actually learns throughout the process, and then we involve even more people, and they are the ones who are also left with new knowledge and new capability, new energy and new insights. But it's also a way for us to understand the context that they are actually in. And this is something that I believe we have also started to see more and more as more and more important. Josina, you will hear much more from her later. To the right here, you see one of the images of from Josina and her work that has guided us throughout the years about how we need reflection and how we are designing things as individuals and as a collective group. To the left, you see an image from the systems lab that we did in the fall, where Netta was coordinating, managing the lab. And it was a lab with people, refugees with disabilities, and we were sort of getting them all together and having a reflection, both on their individual selves and them as a collective. We shape a lab group, they sense make the insights, they try to find patterns. This is something that we try to get the group to do, so that also the knowledge stays within that group. And here you see Elin, who you will hear much more from, in action in Helsingborg, where we have been working with what the future of family homes could be like. And the lab group explores the visible and the invisible patterns. So what is it that we can see? What is it that we can experience? And how can an embodied practice actually help us in that? You can read much more. One of the things that we want to sort of guide you to is what we have called ovisshetsrapporter in Swedish, in English, the uncertainty reports. It is messy out there. Complex challenges are not easy. They shouldn't be easy. We cannot sort of try and believe that we can see the whole, but we can at least sort of get into it, and we can get courage and strength from one another. And the uncertainty reports is our sort of our own guiding tool, and also what we hope can bring about clarity to others. One of the things then for the rest of this conversation is actually to introduce the speakers, the ones that will reflect. It's an honor to have my colleagues here, and Elin Engström, and Netta Korhonen. They're both senior designers with an expertise in systemic design. Elin is right now working in Helsingborg. She's been working with Fagersta, and she will, I think there will be examples from many different labs that Elin has been involved in. And Netta is now, she worked with us in the fall. She's now working back in Helsinki at Motiva. And you have worked as a designer at Arbetsförmedlingen and also at Vinnova. And we're so happy to have you both here. But now, Josina, we're super happy to be able to listen into your thoughts and reflections and deep knowledge about systemic design. You are the associate professor at the Oslo School of Architecture and Design. You have worked in many different places, the Mayo Clinic, for example. You're the design lead in the Center for Connected Care in Norway. And we are super thrilled that we have been able to share. I think our journey would not have been the same had we not had you there as our sort of guiding person. But please, I'll stop sharing my screen and you can, if you want to share the screen.
Perfect. Thank you, Pia. I feel absolutely the same, that our journeys are entangled and mine wouldn't be the same without learning from you and your team also. So welcome everyone, good morning. I'm going to be sharing with you today about a kind of alternative take on systemic design, arguing for a sort of everyday mundaneness of systemic design and an embodied experience of systemic design. And I'll share with you some kind of raw personal stories as a way to show how systemic design kind of reveals itself in the everyday. As many of you know, systemic design is growing in popularity. It's often framed as kind of systems thinking applied to design practice to address complex challenges. We're often talking about how our scope of practice is expanding, and that's why we need kind of systems thinking to help us think about all of this kind of hyper complexity in the world. I challenge that idea a little bit, and I hope you can kind of see why by the end of today. But often systemic design is kind of being implied in housing or immigration or social services, lots of different spheres. And within this, I find that the dialogue tends to emphasize expert systemic designers. We kind of talk about systemic design as something that's very difficult, and we tend to kind of overemphasize the ways in which this complexity is so difficult to grasp, and that we need kind of this expertise of a systemic designer in order to grasp it. And to just kind of illuminate that point, we can look at one of the main kind of methods or approaches of systemic design, and that's kind of these system maps or gigamaps or mega maps, as they're sometimes called. And this is an example of one that I have done with some of my team. So I'm certainly, I critique myself in this critique also. But Haraway talks about this idea of kind of the view from above, the view from nowhere. I think that so often when we do mainstream systemic design, we flatten our systems and we kind of put them out there. We remove any sense of perspective from them. And this idea of capturing hypercomplexity, even though there is acknowledgement by folks who are proponents of these kind of gigamaps that we can't capture everything in a system, somehow by intending to create a more holistic view, I think we erase what isn't there and erase perspectives that I have found we've kind of coming through my own work. So I want to kind of present challenge this, and I think these maps actually also reinforce the need for an expert designer, because it's really hard to interpret. I don't know if any of you can make sense of this map that we have made here. Probably not. You can maybe see some of the connections, but we have this kind of rich then understanding of our intended symbols and things here. But it kind of then creates a dependence and a reliance on us as kind of these expert designers when we're reinforcing this. And I love this quote by Anne-Marie Willis, who's a design philosopher. And she says, when a question of a philosophical character is posed, such as what is design, the answer is mostly already overdetermined by the model of professional design as a model of all designing. And I think so often we are thinking about, when we're thinking about design more generally, we think about the kind of trained designer, and then we put it on to kind of what all design is. So the kind of larger discourse around systemic design becomes about what systemic designers do. And I think we need to decenter systemic designers a little bit more. Not that they're not useful. We'll kind of get back to that maybe in the discussion with Netta and Ellen as well. But I think we have a tendency in systemic design to do this act of defuturing that Tony Fry talks about. And that while kind of we know that social systems design is this kind of conscious creation of possibility in our human worlds, we tend to kind of erase plurality and flatten it and create this kind of one world that instead of all of the messy, many ways of doing design, many ways of working, when we create this kind of one map, we have this one interpretive lens that becomes kind of the reality. And that's certainly not the intention, but it somehow inadvertently comes into being. So I want to bring in some thinking from classic American pragmatists, and they were really folks who kind of in the late 1800s and early 1900s challenged some of the dominant kind of philosophical thinking at the time around being objective, this kind of singular notion of the truth, and the dualism of mind and body. And they really emphasize this sort of grounded, situated, pluralistic understanding of how systems are shaped. So this is kind of what some of this thinking is based on. One of the things that some of these classic American pragmatists like John Dewey bring forward is the notion of transaction. And here it's not transaction in the way that we normally think about it. It's the idea that our kind of corporeal or bodily existence is mutually constituted by our environment. So a transaction is kind of in contrast to interaction that says there are two separate entities, ourselves and another being, and we are kind of interrelating. The transaction is actually saying we are co-constituted by each other. So it's kind of making these things a little bit messy. And Dewey really argues that our bodies are composed of social systems through our habits, through our regular activities, and that it's those habits that shape these activities. And a more contemporary feminist pragmatist, Shannon Sullivan, she brings this forward through the metaphor of the stew that I absolutely love. So she talks about us being kind of stewing in our environment, that one person, might be a carroty onion. We're getting some stewing from others, some influence. Even if we're a carrot, we get a little oniony flavor. The onions get a little carroty flavor. And it's through this process of stewing with each other that we become mutually constituted. And that's not to say that we're all the same. On the contrary, a stew is still very much keeping the distinctiveness of some of the different components, but we start to kind of absorb some of these similar flavors and influence each other. And this happens in social systems as well. And another thinker, Mead, George Herbert Mead, he's bringing forward the idea that actually the very notion of the self is something that happens through our interaction with our kind of social system, and that it is a social structure itself to think about kind of the boundaries of our skin being the notion of the self. And so actually this idea is that we are open systems. We eat the things outside of us. We eat, they become part of us. We release things, we plant things. We're as part of these systems, and these kind of boundaries are arbitrary. So now I'll just share one kind of story from my own lived experience of the ways, the kind of mutual constitution and stewing in social systems. After gym class, I follow to the right exit of the gym and push the door with the sign, "Girls' Changing Room" open as I move in unison with the chattery procession. This collective habit of undressing and redressing together with almost half the class validates my gender. No one questions it, not even myself at the time. The boys' changing room was the only other option, and that felt to me to be totally out of the question. Together, we peel off our baggy t-shirts and shorts, sweaty from the circuits we'd completed. That attire is appropriate for gym, but showing our curves was needed to move through the halls of the high school and not be met with averting eyes. Julie gracefully pulls off her shirt, clasps her wire bra on the outside of her sports bra before pulling off the sports bra entirely, carefully replacing fabrics so as not to reveal her nipples. She layers on a striped Roxy tank top, Then, after removing her shorts, tugs back on her new dark Parasuco jeans before proceeding to the mirror to fix her hair and makeup. More timidly, I turn to face the white wall of the changing room, scan to make sure no one is looking my way, and frantically, but not too frantically to draw attention, switch my gym shirt for my tank top and Cleveland Cavaliers jersey. I don't change my sports bra because that would mean exposing my not quite expectant body to the scrutinizing looks and whispers of my friends and classmates. With my street clothes on top, I carefully rearrange the prosthetic breast, which hides in my sports bra, into the proper place for mimicking the female silhouette. I had needed to have something on the right side of my bra since my left breast started developing, and not the right in grade 6. My mom quickly found me a shoulder pad from one of her old blazers in those early days, until a silicone prosthesis could be obtained from the local mastectomy shop. It was never a question that chest symmetry was required. It was such an expectation that I was encouraged to visit the plastic surgeon who recommended that a back muscle be pulled into my front so I could get a breast implant, which would make my life so much easier. I halted that operation, unwilling to give up full rotation of my right arm and jeopardize my baseball throw, just so that my Poland syndrome body could conform to images of women I'd seen in magazines and all around me in rural Ontario. Still, I knew I needed to uphold the illusion of symmetry, so I stowed on the prosthetic breast every morning and kept it hidden under my clothing, even when changing. This helped me walk the halls and perform the habits of Little Women with confidence, even if I was a bit hesitant. After putting on my own too tight jeans, I proceeded to the mirror behind Julie. As a sporty girl, I could get away with a jersey and jeans that would need to be offset with at least some mascara to look a bit more feminine. Still, my eyes usually ended up with dark smudges at the end of the day because I forgot not to rub them. Just then, I carefully looked ahead in the mirror and moved the applicator from the base of my lashes to the tip, just like I saw the other girls do. So in that story, you can kind of see that through my routines, I'm performing what it means to be this kind of social structure of a girl, and that these activities that I'm kind of performing were influenced by the performances of others in my social context. And together, our ways of kind of inhabiting this really constitutes this gender binary that kind of plays out in gym class or in kind of school dances. And it really is aiming to show how my body itself is constituted by my relations with others and those of the kind of social community around me. But then, so this shows kind of mutual constitution, but actually, we are continually being remade through our relationship with each other. And that friction kind of in our ways of relating create a possibility for transformation. So we're not just in a recursive loop with our environment where it influences us and then we reinforce it, but it's actually more of a spiral where there's the possibility for kind of coming back to places, but seeing them differently and acting differently in similar positions. So I'll share one more story about this kind of process of mutual transformation in my everyday life. It was becoming more and more common for people to introduce themselves with their pronouns along with their names. I dreaded it every time such an introduction was to occur, as I just couldn't relate to the pronouns I was assumed to use. I did a body shudder when I was in a group that someone called ladies, and felt an increasing rub when people referred to me as her. After being introduced to my roommate's partner, who went by they, them pronouns, and awkwardly stuttering over their pronoun formulation one night in our shared kitchen, I started reading everything I could about gender queerness, transness, and non-binary identities, supported by some life-changing recommendations from my housemate. Slowly, I began to realize that the gender that I'd been wearing like an itchy sweater and taken for granted for most of my life was a social structure that I no longer wanted to enact. With the help of a few friends and my partner at the time, I started testing the use of they, them pronouns. Before that, I felt like I couldn't possibly inconvenience people to adjust how they referred to me. But when I heard a few of my friends say it, I felt so deeply seen and respected. This gave me the confidence I'd previously lacked to cut my hair off and start making tweaks to my wardrobe. As the months passed, I started to appreciate the intensely relational nature of gender, and that to feel more at home in my body I needed to do something to acknowledge my non-binary identity with those I interacted with every day. After a tumultuous time of summer reflection, the new school year was upon me, and a fresh batch of master's students that I would soon teach would be in the large auditorium for their orientation. I could not bear the thought of starting at the school year without clarifying my preferred pronouns to my colleagues and students. The day before the students were to arrive, I hurriedly crafted an email to my colleagues with cute comic-like illustrations explaining the gender landscape I was roaming around in and my pronoun preferences under the subject line, gender reveal party. After a helpful review of the email from a friend, I hesitantly pressed send. I received an overwhelming number of supportive replies from my colleagues, but also many expressed worries about messing up my pronouns in their messages. I had some awkward hallway encounters after that email, but was reassured by one colleague that left a treat on my desk with a note that read, "No party without cake." Amid this mix of emotions, it was time for the annual staff introductions in the auditorium. I was thankful that the colleague before me was the only one to introduce herself with her pronouns. It made the threshold that felt almost insurmountable just a little bit easier. Next was my turn. I tried to breathe deeply. After saying my name, I blushed and announced, "I know this might be new for some of you, but I'd prefer if you would refer to me using they, them pronouns." I attempted to be my regular confident self, but my voice cracked as I spoke. The crowd of faces looked at me with friendly but puzzled gazes. A student came up to me after the introduction to talk through what I meant, and several more asked me for discussions about gender in the months that followed. Mostly I was still referred to using she, her pronouns at the school. I corrected people when I had the strength, but often I let it go. Some people did shift to how they referred to me, and I know it helped others do the same. 2 years later, there are more folks at the school that use they, them pronouns. I'm starting to hear it in other gender neutral terms more and more in meetings and emails, sometimes even in self-corrections in the moment. Together in our awkwardness, we're muddling through, reconfiguring our habits and our introductions, and challenging social structures associated with gender in our small school community in Oslo. So if we think about this story of this kind of messy transformation, we can see this sort of spiral of entangled evolution where I'm influenced, I'm in places of friction in my environment, and I'm kind of confronted with this understanding of gender that I hadn't really grappled with. And it's through these kind of awkward transactions where we're co-constituted that I start to build this awareness of this kind of social structure around gender that I'd previously taken for granted. And then by kind of continuing to experiment with this, some things shifted, but sometimes also the environment pushed back. It wasn't just this me changing and then the whole environment changing around me. It's this kind of awkward, messy negotiation and process of kind of spiral of change. So kind of taking these stories and then reflecting back on systemic design, my aim is to show the ways in which actually systemic design can play out in everyday habits, like in dressing in the girls' changing room or in introductions when we're using kind of unexpected pronouns. And here, my hope is to say that if we stay with this kind of plurality of lived experience and the embodied, situated action, something different might happen than if we're kind of flattening and extracting systems into static representations and maps. I have a feeling that actually our bodies are really incredible at accounting for complexity in many underappreciated ways. And that when we think more rationally about systemic design, it takes for granted these things. So even if I think about like the blushing, that's a powerful act of knowing your social context and knowing what's appropriate in it and that you're kind of stepping outside of it. Our body gives us incredible analysis and indicators of complexity. And I think we're often kind of not fully tapping into them in systemic design, and that by not doing that, we're also erasing the potential of this kind of larger transformation by communities. So I'm excited to get into it with Ellen and Netta, but in terms of the implications for professional systemic designers, this is not to say that we should apply how we understand professional systemic design to everyone or to all design, but rather to say that if we can attend to lived experiences and nurture a sort of collective reflexivity or awareness of the kind of structures that we're maneuvering in, we can support a more autonomous design by communities. And by this, I mean folks that have the ability to kind of shape the worlds that they inhabit for themselves and do that in respectful relation with each other. And that we as professional designers are not doing that for others and kind of defuturing them. So in this way, I'm seeing everyday systemic design not as a design discipline, and that it should not be disciplined actually, but that we are aiming to kind of appreciate and nurture this everyday shaping to leverage our entangled agency, and that there's a huge transformative power in starting to kind of build up this collective reflexivity and process. So with that, I will close and looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you so much for that, Josina. Nurturing in itself to have that sort of personal reflection and experiences also build the further discussion that we will have. I invite you to write in the chat if you have any questions, anything that you wonder about in what Josina just presented, so that we can use that for the reflection that will be coming up. But I'm thinking just as a bridge into the reflection with Elin and Netta, Josina, the way you talk here about systemic design not being a discipline and shouldn't be disciplined, but rather that it's nearly it's something that we can all apply in our lives. And if we applied it, and if we as designers and the design community and people outside of the design community as well, working with change, if we can allow people to feel and share reflections and experiences and learn and build on that, the way you're describing that as being the true potential for really systems change, can you dwell a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think for me, I do see it as part of this kind of bigger potential, but I would maybe nuance that I don't necessarily see it as something outside that needs to be applied, but rather a nurturing of what's already happening, our bodies are already doing in the everyday, all of the kind of traditional ways that we are shaping the world around us and interacting. But that systemic design, as we often think about it, might be able to play a role among this kind of plurality of ways of kind of shaping worlds in a humble and nuanced way to help others open up and really tap into that way that they're already kind of muddling through in the awkward encounters in these mutually constituted interactions with or transactions with their social systems. So I think, and when you talk about potential, I do agree. I think that when we underestimate this everyday mundaneness, that's also maybe part of why our systems so often push back. We're like, great, we're going to introduce this big systems transformation. We want to shift toward remote care in Norway. And then our systems are like, oh, we're just doing our thing. We're shaping ourselves in all these ways. So if we're not attending to all of the everyday ways people are shaping and really thinking about that as part of a systemic transformation, I think we're also doing ourselves a disservice. But it maybe becomes less about an imposed kind of one direction by, trained professional systemic designers of a direction a system needs to go in, and more that kind of cultivating in these different situations and amplifying some of these everyday ways of shaping.
And it also, I think it brings in a beautiful sense for the way we've been working and the way I think we perceive systems change is also the sort of the micro actions that can actually take place. The plurality of those micro actions is actually the driving force and has always been the force for the real transformations. Totally. But they need to maybe be very, very close to where the people are, And I'm also thinking them the local, the national, that sort of interplay. This is super interesting. And Fergus I think that you touched upon this, but he's curious. He says about that stew, the oniony carroty and the carroty onion. He's interested in when it violently refuses that. Could you say something on that?
Yeah, thank you. Absolutely, there's violence in the stewing and there is rejections in the stewing, but I don't think it's a fully spitting out of the stew. I think even in that violence and in that rejection, there is this co-constitution. We are left with the marks of being rejected or being spit out, and those lingering echoes in our habits and in our hesitations to do similar things again. But also, I think there are implications when people are pushing or shifting or making awkward other folks in these kind of social stews. And even sometimes I've witnessed the ways in which an immediate rejection or violent reaction can also shift over time to become something different. But I think this is not, we're not all singing Kumbaya in this stew. Absolutely, Fergus. It can be, there is often conflicting flavors that aren't working together very well. And I think we do need to kind of attend to, in systemic design and in thinking about social systems transformation, attend to the very real conflicts between these ways of working. And yeah, I think, I'm not sure, Fergus, if we've talked about this before, but I have been very interested in these ideas of the uncommons. And I think finding ways that we can nurture plurality without pushing people to kind of come together, but this respectful ways of relating. I think moving away from violent rejections to negotiations that don't force kind of this homogeneity in systems is really what I'm aspiring to in this practice. But yeah, I think absolutely there's conflict. It is not a peaceful process all the time.
And I think there's conflict, could be conflict within the group, and maybe that conflict needs to be taken care of. I'm thinking that we also sometimes refrain from even addressing it, or we just want it to be peaceful and nice. But I think your experiences and reflections that you share also shows the potency of actually having that reflection with yourself and that conflicting sort of, because when it shifts in you and you are sort of giving that out into the world, they need to shift. And then there's a whole process that actually gets started through that, I think, a self-reflection that goes on with you in that. We will, I just have one more question. You were saying at the start of your presentation, Josina, that there's a lot of talk now about systemic design, and the way that you perceive it now is not to talk about it as a discipline, but in what way applying this lens and maybe allowing more people to have systemic capability or feeling that there are spaces where this can actually take place in a world of polycrisis, in a world where messy challenges are all around us. Do you believe that this can be a driving force for what needs to be out there in the world?
Yeah, I think it's really by nurturing this kind of agency of kind of collectives in relation to each other. I think systemic design does have a very important role to play. I think if we're just kind of reproducing these systems in the same old ways, we are driving at crisis. You know, we realize that many of our kind of social systems are no longer fit for purpose, that we need radical shifts of these social systems. So I really believe in the power of kind of collective agency in kind of helping make this shift. But I I think that systemic design's tendency towards the big picture, the zooming out, that there's something missed. And it's not to say we shouldn't oscillate, we shouldn't zoom out, absolutely. But I think there's a lot of power and potential in the particulars, in the small scale, and the collective small scale action that can happen, and the both and. So not to lose sight of the kind of agency on the ground, and that this kind of negotiation, and that we really do want to have kind of democratic, plural social systems, rather than kind of us predetermining the kind of next big shift for the one system that will kind of save us. So I think we need this healthy negotiation happening for the kinds of polycrisis that we're facing.
Thank you. There's so much lovely stuff in the chat, but I'll now, and we will try and see if we can get back to your questions and your reflections. But I'd like to invite Netta and Elin onto the scene here, and digging even deeper into the practice that we are in our everyday, that you are in your everyday designer lives, and ask you to maybe invite all of us into a context or a situation where you have yourself felt this embodied, where it's been introduced by you, or where the embodiment in that situation actually gave a shift or gave an effect that you found to be interesting. And I think I'll start with Elin. Can you sort of remind yourself of a situation where you saw the qualities or the importance of this, and how would you describe it?
I'll take you back then to Fagersta, to a lab, where we were exploring relationships between school staff, the children, and children with migration experiences, and their parents. This was a lab that had its focus on strengthening the relationships between the school staff and the parents, as the school staff felt that they didn't reach out, they didn't connect to these parents. And there is an assumption that a good relationship with the parent helps the children in their education and their development of knowledge. So what we tried to do in this lab group was to understand the dynamics, what is happening in the relationships, and why is this understanding of the disconnection happening. We, the lab group, interviewed both their colleagues and parents, and met children. And what we could understand from a pattern view was that the school staff seemed to have an idea that the parents didn't really care about their children, they thought. They also felt that the parents had a lack of knowledge on the school system, and they thought it was the parents' how do you say, parents'
attitude, lack of interest, or
to gain that knowledge, not that the school staff should have helped them to configure the information of the school system that they thought they needed. So with this understanding, we also listen to the parents. What is happening in your life when you come here? How do you feel in the interaction with the school? And one prominent feeling was that they were very, had a lot of gratitude. Like, I trust the school. They are taking care of my children. I trust them. I don't want to interfere with their ideas of how to do it. Was one. But they also felt that I'm a burden when I talk. I don't know the language, so I don't want to step into this relationship as I feel stupid. And also although there was gratitude and this feeling of being a burden in the language, there was also some fear of the school reporting to the social services, and a fear of lose their children, as the school has some kind of duty to report if they understand förhållanden. Please help me out. I'm sorry in the English.
Conditions.
Condition, thank you. And this could be like, oh, my kid stumbled outside. Will they take my kid now? Like the understanding of what levels they report was very poor. So a lot of feelings present and ideas of the other present in the relationship. And the children also said that we don't want you to have contact with our parents if you, without letting us know. And they being in this tension of entering this new world, understanding it much quicker than their parents, and helping, being a bridge towards their parents. So they existed in this relationship, the tension between the school staff and the parents, and they wanted to gain control in it. So with this understanding on the dynamics, we walked the microactions path. What are the different spaces of actions that the school staff can renegotiate the relationships together with the children and the parents? And one person in this lab group, she was working in the daycare. Is it called like that? Daycare? Skola. And she obviously has both morning and afternoon interactions with parents. And in the afternoon, when the mom came to pick up the child, it is some kind of routine that the teacher talks about what the child has been doing or evolving or experienced during the day. And this person, she felt that I'm telling, but it's not robbing. Like I might not say it as well, as it doesn't give meaning into our interaction. So what she did was to sit down for a bit. This is often a stressful time, they describe. So she sat down and she asked the child to say in her language to her mom what she's been doing today. And then she asked in her mother tongue then. And then she asked the parent, what did your child tell you? And asked for her to try to speak in Swedish if possible. And this was very difficult, very, very difficult in the beginning. And still though, and this is something that I think connects a little bit to what you've been talking about, being seen and being respected.
Yeah.
She felt seen somehow and involved in the relationship. So they said that we continue to try to do this construction of the interaction. And after 3 weeks, this parent herself took initiative to talk also in Swedish. My kid is telling me this is happening tonight, and we've discovered this in our conversations. So the dynamics of the relationship shifted incredibly. And through this, Elizabeth, this person, she also, the teacher, she understood obviously that they do care about their children. I'm sorry that I carried this mental model into this relationship. I understand that I have power to act differently. And also I think this is a shift in her. She went from feeling powerless. I cannot do anything. This is beyond my action space. But this small interaction made her look differently into the relationship. And obviously also if this parent feels safe to talk in Swedish in this domain, perhaps it rubs off in other social domains, and what could the ripple effects of such be?
Super. Elin, I'll have to ask you to, that's, I think there's something so powerful there, the being seen and the connection back to Josina. I'll get you back, Josina, with your, how you can see if there are any threads here in between, but just allowing Netta in as well. From your experience, do you have some, like a story, a similar story where this is, where you have seen this, maybe micro actions taking place or just getting people together? Netta.
Yeah, so many stories. I love that example that Elin was sharing, how much like a tiny change in the routine, how big effect it can make. And that's why it's difficult to talk about systemic design as a discipline, that you could make a method book or an online course. It's so much about I don't know, changing, letting go of some ideals, being very vulnerable in the system or in your work, very, very much listening, inviting others. And I loved what you were, Josina, talking about, the kind of awkwardness as a part of learning, and this balance between being a professional and being an awkward learner and kind of facilitator in the systems. But the story I wanted to tell all of you today was from last December. It was one of those first really cold winter days where you are nose gets all cold and it's sunny outside, and me and some colleagues from Sweden and amazing experts from different parts of refugee system of receiving refugees and integrating immigrants in Sweden. So from the border control police to migration agency and social insurance agencies, so different people, professionals, and we climbed into an old library, and we're discussing this system of being a refugee. It's not even one system. You cannot draw it in just one piece of paper. What is happening when a person comes to Sweden, has left their country, and our special focus was people with disabilities or refugees that somehow didn't fit into the norm. Maybe had cancer, maybe were blind, maybe somehow had a non-normative functionality, and it was just a simple tool that we were using, or we had printed out kind of the different phases of the system onto the floor and just on A4 papers. It formed kind of a monopoly template, as you would say, on the floor. And we were different professionals kind of standing in different parts of the system, just talking to each other, reflecting on just one simple cases that we had heard, some situations, and then drawing it back to more policy or rules and legislation and political discussions, and then back to, oh, I remember that guy that came from Syria who had cancer, who lived in a gymnastics hall and still received the cancer treatments. It's so interesting of kind of pendling, going back and forth between the situational, between the big picture, being awkward, asking questions, bouncing back and forth from beginning of the process or system to the end. So maybe that's the strongest strongest experience of ever talking about system in that kind of big way.
It was an amazing afternoon in the library, and I'm thinking, because they were positioned, they were actually walking around with each other, reflecting. It was very much a collective reflection of the system that they were part of, and how they together then could actually, through some micro actions, try and do more in that system. Josina, is there anything from here, where would you like to jump in the last sort of 5 minutes that we have for this discussion? Anything that you see as a thread from what you were saying?
Yeah, I'm just thinking about the pattern from Ellen, what you shared, and Netta, what you just shared about this kind of shifting dynamics at a small scale. And I mean, Adrienne Maree Brown has this quote that like what we practice at the small scale sets the patterns for the whole system. And of course, we don't have, just by changing something small, it doesn't change every aspect of the social system. But because these systems are fractal, I think it gives us a very interesting systemic understanding when we can kind of concentrate, as Ellen, as you were saying, on these dynamics between a parent and a child and their communication and communicating with the school. And then Netta, as you were talking about this kind of movement between the kind of zooming in and out, I think there's something kind of powerful that if we can resist the kind of pressure in systemic design to flatten and always go kind of big and kind of start with the policy implications and all these things, and actually kind of understand the nuances, the feelings that you were kind of talking about, and that kind of embodied experience in the here and now. There's a lot we can learn about system, and systems exist at a small scale too. So these kind of patterns of how we make shifts can tell us a great deal about these kind of bigger changes in the system. So I'm just struck by these kind of beautiful ways that you're kind of bringing people together, staying close to lived experience, and then learning from these, whether it's individual cases, as you were saying, Netta, or these kind of interactions that unfold over time that you were talking about, Ellen. So I think, you give me hope about other ways of kind of doing systemic design that are really situated and embodied.
Elin, please.
Yeah, well, I was thinking also about moving between the small story and the bigger picture, and how we, in this project, we try to understand also what is scaling a learning from this example. What does that entail, and how do we do that, and what is an invitation to learn from this case in a larger scale within the system in this municipality. And so we tried to invite 300 people actually during 2 weeks, and did a workshop on the embodiment of like the stories from the lab, and also inviting people to what does these stories do to your practice in your everyday life? What is your action space that you want to explore from your position? And from that, we were also questioning and trying to understand what is the control of such invitation. Like, we cannot control such. We need to rely on the responsibilities and the trust on people's engagement and wanting to see and to be seen in the systems, and see or listen. Like, and I think that's a capability and a skill that we undermine. We don't nurture it enough today. So I'm still on that questions on what is control and what is drawing the maps of that plurality. If more teachers would start to engage differently and reshape the relationships just slightly. What kinds of effects does that give to?
I think there's something really powerful, Ellen, what you're talking about, of kind of understanding deeply lived experiences that are often on the margins. And Netta, you were saying that too, these kind of non-normative bodies or experiences, that we have something, if we can bring them into the kind of mainstream and the systems can actually learn, there's a lot that we can do to support a more kind of equitable transformation if we shift the margins kind of to the middle in our learning systems. I think that's really powerful.
We will have to end the discussion there. This is just the start. It's a trampoline for all of us to sort of further think about the context where you all are, who have been with us here today. And for all of us, this is, as I said at the start, this is a true need for ourselves also to sense make in our own practice, and to do that together with you is one of the ideas behind these systems for breakfast. Josina, we are so thrilled that you could join us this morning. Netta from Norway, and Netta from Helsinki, and Elin from Stockholm. And from one of the things that we would like, if you want to share just an insight in the chat before you leave, or a new question that arose that you would like us to maybe talk about in a next seminar, that would be super helpful for us. And waiting to get a few of those things into the chat. Just a big thank you to all of you this morning, and looking forward to keeping this sort of community spiraling on. I think we all need that for the kind of changes that are ahead of us. But thank you so much for this morning.